Hey there, and welcome to Get Career Curious, the podcast that gives you the inside scoop on careers, what it takes to get there, and what the job is really like. This week, we're talking with Dr. Darren Eblovi. Darren's journey is anything but ordinary. He started out majoring in economics, dreaming of a business career, and he even interned at Ernst Young's global headquarters in London. But that internship sparked some serious soul-searching. He realized the business world wasn't for him. So he took a leap, joined the Peace Corps in El Salvador, and worked on rural health and sanitation projects, all while applying to medical school from a village that didn't have electricity or running water. Fast forward to today. Darren is a pediatric hospitalist and the medical director of the Well Baby Nursery at the University of Colorado Hospital on the Anschutz Medical Campus. He's dedicated his career to saving newborns, mentoring future doctors, and making a real impact in Colorado and around the world. Get ready to hear how he found purpose, adventure, and joy by forging his own path in medicine. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you.
Darren, did you always know you wanted to be a doctor?
No, I decided more toward the end of undergraduate study. I majored in economics in college and studied some Spanish as well. But I went into college thinking that I wanted to go into business, to have my own business in some kind of field like my hobbies were outdoor adventure sports or music, like a music venue or recording or things like that. But I changed gears. I had an internship with Ernst Young, the accounting firm in London, in their global headquarters. There was part of my college. And so I spent a semester there for 6 months and had a job in the strategic planning department. And as great as it was to live in London, I didn't love the work that I was doing or the path that I saw. And so I was a little nervous that if I didn't select a profession where I had an education that would guide me, I would get trapped into something that I didn't enjoy and not be able to get out of. And so after some exploring and talking to a lot of different people in different fields, I decided to go to med school. I had to do 1 year, a little over a year of prerequisites in addition to my undergraduate degree to be able to apply. And so I did that and then applied from El Salvador, where I was in the Peace Corps.
That was a pretty impressive internship you had with Ernst Young. What about it kind of was a clue to you that this wasn't the right path?
I think it was the people that I was around, and it's not that they weren't friendly and nice. I enjoyed interacting with a lot of them, but I felt that, first of all, the work itself was pretty boring in my role. It wasn't obviously what I would have been doing if I would have stuck with that company forever, but I did feel like who were in that field for their entire careers. Either they were the leaders of the organization and they worked all the time and didn't have time to do anything else, and they were compensated very well. They made a lot of money, but they didn't seem very happy because all they were focused on was work, and it wasn't something that they were passionate about like a vocation. It was just something that made them a lot of money. And then there were the people that did the minimum, who were more like the entry level and just administrative kind of people. And they weren't excited about the work at all. They just did the bare minimum to get by and then go to the bar with their friends. So it just wasn't a field that I felt like I wanted to dedicate my life to. And so it had me do some soul searching.
Yeah, that's one of the really nice things about internships is you can test out different career paths, and I think that's why they're so important. And then tell me a little bit about your experience with the Peace Corps and how that drove your decisions moving forward.
So when I decided to apply, I knew that I was already going to apply to medical school. I had taken all my prerequisites. I took the MCAT, the test that you need to take to apply to medical school. And then I was debating, I wanted to do something in between, something different before I dove into the medical field, because I'm sure, as a lot of your listeners know, you have to study an undergraduate, and then medical school is 4 years, and then a residency, which might include research, can be anywhere from 3 to 10, 12 years. And so it was a long path. And so before then, fortunately, I got a chance to be a ski bum for one winter. So that was fun. But I wanted to do something international, work on my Spanish. And so I looked into some organizations where you could go to a Latin American country and teach English, but a lot of those actually cost money instead of making money. With a Peace Corps, it's not like you're paid a lot, but you get enough to end up a little bit more in a higher position slightly than where you started. And also I felt like it was more of a service. The programs where you would teach English were a little bit more just for recreation, for the experience of the person who was going. And so with the Peace Corps, I felt like it was something good that I'd be able to do for less fortunate people somewhere in a less wealthy country. And I feel like it absolutely satisfied that. So, and I also felt like it would give me some direction as far as where I wanted to go within the field of medicine. And I didn't know exactly how competitive it was going to be to get in. So I thought it would be beneficial for my application as well, which I think it was.
Oh, for sure. And that is a 1-year commitment or a 2-year commitment?
It was a little over 2 years. Yeah. So I was in El Salvador. These days, you can choose a specific country and apply to that country. When I was serving back in 06 to 08, you applied for a region. And if you had some Spanish skills, they let you into the Latin American region if you wanted. And so I asked for that and something health related. And so they said that there was a spot available in El Salvador for a program called Rural Health and Sanitation. So that's what I did. At the time, there were about 4 programs: youth development, municipal development, and agroforestry and environmental education in that country. There was a long time in El Salvador where they didn't have it, but now they're fortunately bringing it back. And so I lived in a really small community. It was about 300 people that I was technically responsible for. I worked with what they call an ADESCO, which is like a small development organization within that community, somewhere between a HOA and a town. But I helped them solicit different infrastructure projects, mostly small stuff. We built some latrines for people who didn't have any. We paved a little stretch of the road so they could get their trucks by during the rainy season a little bit easier. And I taught a lot of classes in the school. We built a classroom for the school. I taught a lot of kids how to play music. That was kind of an extra activity. But overall, it was a great experience. Certainly, there were some frustrations. SCORE takes the approach of keeping a volunteer safe and healthy in their community, but it's not a true development organization, as in they don't in themselves provide a lot of funding for big projects. And so that's their model. And I did have to search out some other funding, which I was able to do for some of those projects that I mentioned. And so a lot of it is just a cultural exchange, interacting with people and learning on both sides. And so it was a very positive experience.
So that puts you out of med school for a little bit of time, for 2.5 years. And then did you apply to med school?
I was able to apply. In my community, we didn't have electricity or running water when I was there. I think they've gotten a little bit of that since then, but I had to write a bunch of essays. And so I remember writing them in pencil on my desk in my community and then going to the internet cafe to type them up and put them into the application software. So it was quite a process. I had time on my hands to do it, but the technology was definitely a challenge. And so I came back. I think these days, medical school interviews are probably still mostly virtual given the pandemic and all that. But when I was down there and applying, it was all in-person interviews. To get into a medical school, you had to go to that campus and do an in-person interview. And so I tried to be a little bit selective. By then I had my scores back and I knew that I was going to be a relatively competitive applicant. So I applied to 6 schools and I was offered an interview at maybe 4 or 5 and did 3 because I had to do it all in one trip back to the United States. But fortunately, I got some scholarship from the University of Colorado, and with the in-state tuition, it was much more affordable, still expensive, but less so than my other options. And so I ended up deciding to go to University of Colorado in Aurora.
So at what point in your journey did you decide medicine was your path, and why?
It was during the time that I was in London. So I was about 20 years old, junior year of college. And I suppose after that, I could have gotten out. I still was thinking about it. But from then on, I mostly went down that pathway. And I think that it was because I knew that it was something that I was capable of doing. I enjoyed that kind of study in the sciences. And it was a skill that I could use to help people, but also make reasonable living and be comfortable with the family. Whereas some of my friends just became ski bums forever, or the mountain lifestyle, which I certainly imagine I would have enjoyed, but I have 3 boys now and I've been married for 12 years. So we're excited to be able to raise our kids in a nice environment. I've had a variety within my career in medicine. I've worked as a pediatric hospitalist in Chicago. I've had 4 years working in the Dominican Republic for a nonprofit where we provide free medical care to underserved populations there, mostly Haitian immigrants. And now I'm at the Children's Hospital in Colorado. And even among this job, I work in at least 4 different units or teams regularly. So I'm constantly learning and being challenged, and I really enjoy it.
So coming out of med school, you did a residency in what? Specialty?
Pediatrics. So as a hospitalist, I could have done and could still do a fellowship to specialize in that subspecialty, which would be a 2-year program. Most fellowships for either pediatrics or internal medicine, like body systems, if you want to be a pediatric cardiologist, or if you want to work in one of the intensive care units, or gastroenterologist, anything like that, those are 3-year programs. The hospital medicine is just a little less subject matter. It's a little more focused on some of the research and quality improvement around hospital medicine. And so that fellowship's an option. I decided not to do that, at least so far, because the roles that I've had have provided great education and within themselves. And also I felt like it would limit our international ability. Like I mentioned, we had the 4 years in the DR. And so that's not something that would have been as easy to do if I would have been locked into a more academic program for longer.
So as a pediatric hospitalist, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? Do you do clinic, or is it all hospital-based? Can you talk a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Absolutely. It's no clinic. It's all hospital-based. So it's either children who can be anywhere from 0 to 18, and in some cases even older. Occasionally, if a young adult has a childhood illness that carries over, that they still feel more comfortable being treated in the children's hospital, we can get older people up into their 20s and 30s, but that's relatively rare. Usually it's about birth to 16 years old, and it's kids that are admitted to the hospital overnight. And so if I do a day shift, I'll have to see them at least once during the day. If they come into the hospital, I'll admit them and write all the orders to provide them all the medications that they get at home if they have any, or if they need new treatments for during their hospitalization. If they're ready to go home and it's someone else that brought them in, or if I did on a previous day, then I'll send them home, arrange for the follow-up appointments that they need and any prescriptions that they might need as an outpatient. And sometimes I work overnight shifts, and in that case, there can be some discharges as well, but more often it is just putting out fires, what we call cross-covering. So if any issue comes up with the child who has already been admitted, the nurse might call me to address a problem, and I can go make modifications to their regimen, or in some cases transfer to them to the higher level of care. So that's the Children's Hospital, and there's different branches and different teams. We have a team that's just dedicated to surgical co-management. So children that have surgery and need to be admitted to the hospital after their surgery, I'll take care of them. One team is more focused on neurological issues. So if kids have seizures, I'll help manage everything else besides the EEG readings and the medication recommendations that the neurologists make. And then I do a lot of work in newborn nurseries. And so this is for babies who are just born, who need all the necessary screenings, physical exam, check off, and some minor issues like if babies have low blood sugar, or if they can't keep their temperature up, or if they have jaundice and they need phototherapy. I can manage all that in the nursery. If they need something more intensive like oxygen therapy or pressure to keep their lungs open, or to help them breathe, or if they need any kind of surgery, then we would transfer them to the intensive care unit, and we would describe the situation and get them sent down to a safer position. And right now I have a role that takes up 20% of my time. So I'm 75 to 80% clinical, just seeing patients in the hospital. And then I also work as the medical director of the Well Baby Nursery at the University of Colorado Hospital. So that's out at the Anschutz Medical Campus where I attended medical school and where the Children's Hospital and all the main university hospital, Veterans Affairs hospitals are located.
So why did you choose to do the hospitalist role versus becoming a pediatrician?
I felt like it matched a little better with my personality and what I was interested in doing. I felt like I was doing more for the children who were admitted to the hospital because they needed something right then to stay healthy, stay safe. You know, it's not always a matter of life or death. The idea is that if they're hospitalized, but they're not in the intensive care unit, that they might need something. I mean, if kids need what we call high flow or a significant amount of oxygen, which I will manage, then they are definitely at risk of death. And so it feels rewarding to provide a service that takes care of children that are in that vulnerable of a position. Certainly, I don't mean to devalue the role of a primary care pediatrician or a family medicine physician for that matter, because those doctors are incredible and they almost never get a break. And there's probably always something going on with one of their patients. You know, they're managing thousands. And that first point of contact with the healthcare system is so important. They can have such a meaningful role. But for me, I do really enjoy that leadership role, which is always has something going on with it. Being able to work my shifts and to an extent leave it behind when I'm done is really important to me too, because I really value my free time and enjoy my hobbies. I want to be able to be as dedicated to our kids and the family as I can be. And I feel like this role allows for that. It definitely sometimes can require some sacrifices like working overnight and doing weekend shifts. But I'm willing to do that in order to be able to have some time off during other times, during the weekdays, to enjoy and help with the kids.
So it's more like a shift role in that you kind of know your schedule in advance. This is when I'm going to be working. This is when I'm off. How does that look?
Sometimes it's variable. And this is another reason I really enjoy the flexibility we do. And different hospital medicine programs do it differently. But at University of Colorado and Colorado Children's Hospital, we put in our requests about 2 months before a 3-month period. And so, for example, I just put in my requests at the end of April, beginning of May, on what I want to work for July, August, and September. And I can request almost as many days off as I'll get, and they're able to place my shifts so that I work more while I'm here and then get those days off that I choose. And so it generally, clinical shifts with my role probably is closer to 3 days a week. And then I usually go to the University Hospital Nursery 1 day a week to do meetings and other administrative work, catch up on emails and whatnot.
That is a great perk of that particular role that you have, because not all healthcare providers or doctors have that level of flexibility.
Absolutely.
So Darren, what's the favorite part of your job? So one thing
I really like is doing newborn resuscitation. And so one of our responsibilities for our team at the University Nursery is to go to medium risk deliveries, babies who are born by C-section or who have meconium-stained amniotic fluid or have demonstrated by heart rate monitoring that they're in some kind of distress, or instrument deliveries, twins. We'll go to those, and they're just a little bit more likely that the babies are going to need some help breathing in the beginning. If they're very premature or if they have some kind of physical congenital anomaly, then they'll often call the neonatology team as opposed to us. But it's relatively often that we provide some level of resuscitation, whether it's just some oxygen or some pressure where we hold a bag and a mask over a baby's newborn's face and squeeze some air into their lungs to get them breathing, because probably about 5% of all babies need a little bit of help in the beginning and like that sort of intervention. And for the most part, almost all of them can be helped just with very simple maneuvers. And that's really enjoyable. I also have done some of that work internationally where I taught midwives in Ghana how to do that, especially the bag mask ventilation. And I lead a class or a module within a class every year. The Center for Global Health at University of Colorado puts on a class called Global Health and Disasters. It's for a variety of learners at different levels, some already professionals, but a lot of fourth-year medical students in their final year before they go into their residency. And so the module that I lead is about that immediate neonatal care, newborn resuscitation. And so we just give those students a brief intro to what they would do, the different steps that they would take if a baby's born, and they're the doctor there, or their responsible party that can help the baby and get them breathing. So that's one aspect I really enjoy.
It sounds like it's very rewarding. So some advice for someone who's considering a career in medicine, maybe they're in college and thinking, I want to go into medicine, or they're on the fence about it. What would you say are some pros about a career in medicine, and then some cons
Well,
as
I think
well?
there are a lot of different things that you can do within the field. You don't necessarily have to be a physician. There's a lot of great opportunities for nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants. And so for people that maybe don't want to go through that whole path, like I mentioned about the 4 years of medical school plus 3 to 8 to 12 years of residency training and research, you can become a physician assistant just with a 2 or 3 year program right out of undergraduate. Or if you want to try nursing first, and then you can become a nurse practitioner with a 3 year or 3 or 4 year program after you've been a nurse for a while. That might give you a little bit more flexibility to go into some different fields, kind of change paths within medicine somewhere down the road. As a pediatrician, I'm relatively locked into being that because I don't want to go through a whole nother residency. Fortunately, I am happier with my choice.
Right.
And like I mentioned earlier, with the hospital medicine, I feel like I get a pretty good variety. And I also really enjoy the academic component, teaching students and residents, the opportunities to work in global health and do research in that regard. And I am satisfied with my choice, but I think that it is a long road. And so for people that are kids that are considering a field in some kind of medicine, just to think about if it's how serious they are about wanting to go for that whole pathway of being a physician, and trying to get as much information as possible from other doctors and other healthcare professionals who can give them advice and try to find out what might be the best match for their lifestyle that they're looking for. But overall,
Yeah, it's a significant financial investment as well as a time investment. So it is something you want to kind of make sure you're very committed
absolutely.
to before
A lot
starting.
of my friends that I went to undergraduate with, for example, just started working right away after undergrad. Maybe they did a master's degree or something later, but there's an opportunity cost for how much time you're going to spend in a medical training, both with medical school and a residency, that you're not going to be working and collecting a full paycheck until quite a while in the future.
Okay. So what would you say is the most challenging part of your
Well, right now for me, it's this new leadership management role. I feel like after studying for 4 years and learning all the ins and outs of the science behind medicine and making the diagnosis, determining what lab studies and imaging studies are necessary to make that diagnosis, and the physical exam findings, I have that pretty down. But management is always a challenge. And so it's not, in my role, it's not like I have people that are reporting to me directly, but I am responsible for making a lot of decisions that impact people's lives as far as their work in different ways. That is sometimes things you have to consider that are a little bit different from just treating the patient in front of you, and navigating the politics of a hospital and the social interactions of everybody within the service and in other services like the OB-GYN doctors and the neonatologists that we have to interact with when babies might be going from one to the other, and how that all works. Just the human resources aspect is a challenge for me because I never really had any training in that. I studied economics and Spanish and medicine and public health, which was great as well. I had a master's in public health that I did as part of the medical school training. But that is the biggest challenge for me. But it's part of the reason why I enjoy doing it, is because it's something new to push myself. And I feel like if you're going to climb the ladder and be promoted, you need to pursue things that don't come quite as naturally to you.
Yeah, well, and that's a great thing that you're offered new opportunities within your career, and that's you can professionally grow, which is always great.
The advice that I would
Go
give
ahead.
to a young person in deciding about going into medicine or any field really is to try to keep open-minded to changing your mind, because I certainly did at not that old of an age, but maybe a little bit older than some people are. And I'm really glad that I did. I was definitely going down the pathway, like I mentioned, of going into the business world and accounting and finance. And that's fine for some people. I don't think that I would have been satisfied and fulfilled in the long run. And so being able to make a change a little bit later has been very beneficial for me. So I really don't think that if you decide that you want to do something different when you're 20, 25, 30 years old, that's important that you should be able to make that change and not regret what you've done up until that point and consider it a waste, because it's important that you consider life and your career as a journey. And sometimes you're not always going to be able to predict exactly how things turn out. But if you're open-minded to making a change, I think it can be more positive in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. It is really hard to make one life choice and think you're going to stick with it forever. And it's nice that you have had the opportunity to kind of weave your career a little bit from working in the US to working in the Dominican Republic. All right. So to wrap things up, if you were to talk to your younger self or to give career advice to a young person, it doesn't even have to be in medicine, what one last piece of advice would you like to give?
I'd say be true to what you know about your values and your morals, and choose a path that you know you're going to be excited doing and talking about, whether or not it is the most lucrative or not, because you spend a lot of time. Everybody's going to be spending a lot of time at their job unless somebody figures out something that I haven't figured out yet. It's going to be something that you are dedicating a lot of effort to. And so it's obviously you want to be compensated enough to live comfortably, but it's more important that you feel fulfilled and feel satisfied with the work that you're doing. Enjoy it on a basic level, but that what you've completed is worth your time.
Yeah, that's super advice, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you for being on the
My
podcast
pleasure.
today, Darren. Thank you for joining us today. Our goal is to help listeners discover meaningful careers that bring them joy and purpose. If you have a friend who's interested in medicine and might benefit from today's discussion with Darren, please share this episode with them. But before we go, here are 3 key takeaways from my conversation with Dr. Darren Eblovi. First, trying something and realizing it's not for you is just as valuable as finding your passion right away. Darren's internship in business helped him pivot toward a path that was truly exciting to him. Second, taking time for service and adventure, like Darren's Peace Corps experience in El Salvador, can give you clarity, new skills, and a sense of purpose you can't find in the classroom. And last, your career journey doesn't have to be a straight line. Staying open to change, listening to your values, and pursuing what excites you can lead to a fulfilling and impactful life. Want even more career insights? Join our community at getcareercurious.com for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access of this podcast that you won't find anywhere else. Thank you again for joining me today, Marita McCahill, in this episode of Get Career Curious. Until next time.